I thought I was going to my son's house, but I walked into a nightmare I never saw coming. The moment I heard my daughter-in-law call me a burden, something inside me shattered. I stood there, frozen, realizing I wasn't welcome in the home I once helped build. But what happened next changed everything. I made a decision that no mother ever wants to make, and it forced my son to face a truth he had been avoiding. This isn't just a story about heartbreak. It's about respect, boundaries, and finding your worth when the people you love forget it. Trust me, this ending will stay with you. I never imagined that the hardest door I would ever stand in front of would be the one to my own son's house. But life has a cruel way of rewriting the stories we think we've already finished. My name is Eleanor Thompson, 68 years old, widowed, and until that crisp October evening, still foolish enough to believe that family was the one place where you were always wanted. It all began 6 months after Robert died. The heart attack took him in his sleep, quiet and sudden, the way he had lived most of his life. Steady, dependable, never one for drama. We had been married 43 years, raised James in a modest 2-story colonial in Ann Arbor, Michigan, with a backyard big enough for snowball fights and summer barbecues. I thought those years had prepared me for anything. I was wrong. The house felt too big after Robert was gone. Echoes in the hallway, his favorite coffee mug still sitting in the cupboard like it was waiting for him. I spent my days sorting through old photos, watering plants that no longer needed tending, and pretending I wasn't lonely. Then the phone rang one rainy Tuesday afternoon. "Mom?" James's voice came through the line, warm but tired. He was calling from his sleek glass office in downtown Chicago, where he worked as a senior financial analyst. "You can't stay in that big empty house alone forever. The twins keep asking about Grandma. Come live with us for a while. We have plenty of space." I hesitated, twisting the wedding ring I still wore on my left hand. "James, honey, I don't want to impose. Sophia is so busy with work and the kids." "Nonsense," he cut in gently. "Sophia agrees. It'll be good for all of us. You can help with the children, and honestly, we could use an extra pair of hands around here. Just temporary, until you figure out what's next. The guest room is already made up." I could hear the twins giggling in the background. Little Emma and Ethan, 6 years old, with James's kind eyes and Sophia's perfect smile. My heart softened. I had always been close to my son. After Robert's long hours at the auto plant, it was me who helped James with homework, attended every soccer game, and stayed up late when his first girlfriend broke his heart. Moving in felt like a second chance, to be useful, to be needed again. So I said yes. I sold the Michigan house faster than I expected. The realtor called it a charming family home with great bones, but to me, it was 50 years of memories packed into cardboard boxes. I kept only what mattered most: Robert's old pocket watch, our wedding album, a few quilts I had stitched during long winter nights, and the silver locket he gave me on our 30th anniversary. The drive to Illinois took me through golden cornfields and rolling highways, the autumn leaves painting the landscape in fiery reds and oranges. I tried to feel hopeful. New chapter, I told myself. A fresh start with my son's family in their beautiful suburban home in Naperville, one of those picture-perfect Chicago suburbs with wide streets, manicured lawns, and houses that looked like they belonged in a magazine. When I pulled into their driveway that first afternoon, Sophia greeted me at the door with a tight smile. She looked flawless as always. Blonde highlights perfectly styled, designer jeans that somehow stayed spotless even with 2 active children, and a cashmere sweater the color of expensive cream. "Eleanor, welcome," she said, leaning in for a quick air kiss. "The kids are so excited." The house was stunning. A spacious 2-story colonial with white trim, a wraparound porch, and a finished basement James had turned into a playroom. The kitchen smelled of fresh coffee and expensive candles. Everything was coordinated: gray and white tones, quartz countertops, and those Instagram-worthy open shelves lined with matching ceramic dishes. The first few weeks were almost pleasant. I cooked James's favorite meals: pot roast with carrots and potatoes the way his father liked it, homemade apple pie with extra cinnamon. I helped the twins with their reading homework, braided Emma's hair, and played endless games of Candyland. In the evenings, I sat quietly in the corner of the living room while James and Sophia talked about work deadlines and school events, trying not to feel like an outsider in their perfectly curated life. But small cracks began to appear. Sophia's smiles grew shorter. She started forgetting to include me when she ordered takeout for dinner. Once I overheard her on the phone with her mother. "It's just temporary, Mom. She'll get her own place soon. We can't have her here forever." I told myself it was normal. Adjusting to another adult in the house couldn't be easy for a busy career woman like Sophia. She was a marketing director at a big firm downtown. Long hours, high pressure, always posting polished photos on social media with captions like, "Grateful for this beautiful chaos," or "Blessed beyond measure with my little tribe." I tried harder. I reorganized the pantry so everything was easy to find. I offered to pick up the kids from school so Sophia could stay late at the office. I even bought new throw pillows for the living room in the exact shade she liked. Then came that fateful evening in late October. I had driven to the grocery store to pick up ingredients for James's birthday pot roast. His big day was only a week away, and I wanted to make it special, just like I did when he was a boy. The bags were heavy with fresh vegetables, good cuts of beef, and a bottle of his favorite red wine. I let myself in through the side door with the spare key they had given me, humming an old Frank Sinatra tune under my breath. That's when I heard it. Sophia's voice, sharp and frustrated, carried clearly from the living room down the hallway. "Why is that old leech here? We don't have space." My feet froze on the polished hardwood floor. The grocery bags suddenly felt like lead in my hands. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I thought it might break right there in the entryway. James's reply was low, almost pleading. "Sophia, come on. She just lost Dad. She needs us right now." Needs us? Sophia's heels clicked angrily across the floor. "James, I told you this was a terrible idea from the beginning. Your mother is sucking the life out of our routine. She's always in the kitchen, always hovering with the kids, always reminding everyone how things used to be in her perfect little Michigan house. I need my space back. I need my home back." The words landed like stones. Old leech, hovering, sucking the life out. I stood there, invisible, unwanted, my reflection staring back at me from the ornate mirror Sophia had hung by the door. The woman looking back seemed suddenly older, smaller, out of place in this beautiful, cold house. Tears burned my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. Not yet. I quietly set the grocery bags down on the console table, slipped back outside into the chilly autumn air, and sat in my car for a long time, staring at the perfect white picket fence I had helped James and Sophia plant 3 summers ago. That moment, the moment I realized I was no longer welcome in my son's home, was only the beginning. Because what I didn't know then was that the real secrets, the real betrayals, were still buried deep beneath the surface of this perfect suburban life, and they were about to crashing down on all of us. I took a shaky breath, wiped my eyes, and whispered to the empty car, "What do I do now?" Little did I know, the answer would change everything forever. That night, I sat in my car until the streetlights flickered on and the autumn chill seeped through my coat. The grocery bags with James's birthday ingredients still sat untouched on the console table inside. The pot roast I had planned so carefully now felt like a cruel joke. How could I walk back in and pretend I hadn't heard my own daughter-in-law call me an old leech? I wiped my eyes one last time, took a deep breath, and forced myself to go back inside. The house smelled of Sophia's expensive vanilla diffuser and the faint scent of the twins' crayons. I moved quietly, like a ghost in my son's home, putting the groceries away without making a sound. When James came downstairs later, I smiled the same gentle smile I had given him since he was a little boy scraping his knees in our Michigan backyard. "Everything okay, Mom?" he asked, kissing my cheek. He looked tired, his tie loosened, dark circles under his eyes from another long day at the financial firm. "Perfect," I lied. "Just getting things ready for your birthday dinner next week. I thought we'd do the pot roast you love so much." He grinned, but it didn't reach his eyes the way it used to. "You don't have to go to all that trouble." "I want to," I said softly. "It's what families do." Sophia appeared in the kitchen doorway then, scrolling through her phone, her blonde hair swept up in a perfect messy bun that probably took 20 minutes to achieve. She didn't look at me. "James, the twins need baths. Can you handle that? I have a 9 p.m. call with the West Coast team." James nodded and headed upstairs. Sophia finally glanced in my direction, her expression polite but cool. "Thanks for picking up the groceries, Eleanor. You really don't need to do so much." Her words sounded like gratitude, but they landed like dismissal. I wanted to scream, "Then why did you call me a leech?" Instead, I nodded and said, "It's no trouble at all." That became my new normal, smiling through the pain, pretending I hadn't overheard the worst words anyone had ever said about me. The days blurred together in a haze of forced politeness. Mornings, I made breakfast for the twins, while Sophia rushed out the door in her tailored blazer and heels, laptop bag slung over her shoulder. "Have a good day, Grandma," Emma would call, waving her little hand. Ethan would give me a quick hug before climbing into the carpool van. But afternoons were different. Sophia started coming home earlier some days, and the tension thickened like the November fog rolling in from Lake Michigan. She began forgetting to set a place for me at the dinner table. One evening, there were only 3 plates laid out. When I quietly added a 4th, Sophia raised an eyebrow.
"Oh, I thought you might have eaten already," she said lightly, though her tone carried an edge. "I haven't," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "But if it's a problem, I can eat in the kitchen." James looked uncomfortable, shifting in his chair. "Mom, of course you eat with us. Soph, set another place, please." The argument that followed was quiet but sharp, conducted in hissed whispers after the twins were in bed. I sat in the guest room, the door slightly cracked, and listened, even though I hated myself for it. "She's always there, James," Sophia whispered fiercely. "In the kitchen, with the kids, reorganizing my spice rack like she owns the place. I feel like I can't breathe in my own home." "She's my mother," James replied, his voice low and tired. "She just lost Dad. What do you want me to do? Kick her out on the street?" "No, but we had an agreement, temporary. She was supposed to find her own place by now. Instead, she's turning our guest room into her permanent nest. I need that room for my home office. My deadlines are killing me, and every time I try to work, she's humming those old songs or asking if I need help with dinner. It's suffocating." My heart twisted. I had only been trying to be useful. The spice rack? I had organized it because Sophia once complained she could never find the cumin. The humming? It was how I coped with the loneliness that crept in every evening when the house grew quiet. The next morning, Sophia was all bright smiles again for the twins and James, but when she passed me in the hallway, her eyes were cold. "Eleanor, maybe you should look into some senior activities in the area. There's a lovely book club at the community center. It might be good for you to meet people your own age."
People my own age. The words stung like a slap. At 68, I was healthy, active, and sharp-minded. I didn't need to be shuffled off to bingo nights and knitting circles. I wanted to be with my family, the family I had helped build. I started noticing smaller things too. My favorite mug mysteriously disappeared from the cupboard. The quilt I had brought from Michigan was folded and placed at the very back of the linen closet. Once, when I offered to read the twins a bedtime story, Emma looked up at her mother and said, "Mommy says Grandma needs rest, so maybe not tonight." That one nearly broke me. I went to my room and cried silently into my pillow, remembering how Sophia had once hugged me tightly at their wedding and called me Mom with genuine warmth. What had changed? Was it the stress of her high-powered job, the pressure of raising twins while climbing the corporate ladder, or had she always seen me as a burden waiting to happen? The worst night came 2 days before James's birthday. I couldn't sleep. The guest room felt smaller than ever, the walls closing in with every ticking minute on the clock. Around midnight, I crept downstairs for a glass of water. As I passed their master bedroom door, I heard Sophia's voice again, low, venomous, and unmistakable. "If she doesn't leave soon, I'm calling a lawyer about the trust fund your father left. That money could renovate the basement into a proper suite for my parents. They deserve it more than some widow who's overstayed her welcome." I froze in the dark hallway, my bare feet cold against the hardwood. The trust fund? Robert had carefully set aside money for my security and for James's future. It was meant to protect me after he was gone. Was Sophia really planning to challenge it? To take what Robert had left for me and give it to her own parents? My hands trembled as I backed away silently. The water I had come for was forgotten. Instead, I returned to my room, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the silver locket around my neck, the one Robert had given me with our photo inside. That night, the betrayal sank deeper than words. Old Leech had been painful enough, but this was calculated. This was about money, about erasing me, about rewriting our family story so that I became the villain who refused to disappear quietly. I didn't confront them, not yet. I lay awake until dawn, my mind racing with questions I didn't have answers for. Why had Sophia turned against me so bitterly? What else was she hiding behind that perfect Instagram smile? And most terrifying of all, how long had my own son known about her true feelings? The doorway where I had first heard those cruel words wasn't just a moment of shock anymore. It had become the threshold to something much darker. Secrets were starting to surface, and I could feel them pulling me under like a riptide. I whispered into the darkness, "Robert, what do I do now?" But the only answer was silence, and the growing certainty that staying in this house might cost me more than my dignity. It might cost me everything I had left.
The days after that midnight confession blurred into a heavy, suffocating fog. I moved through my son's beautiful Naperville home like a shadow, present yet increasingly invisible. Every smile I forced felt like a crack in my chest. Every "Good morning, Eleanor" from Sophia carried an undercurrent of impatience I could no longer ignore. The house that had once seemed warm and welcoming now felt like an elegant cage with slowly closing bars. Mornings were the only time the tension eased slightly. The twins, Emma and Ethan, still bounded into the kitchen with sleepy eyes and messy hair, demanding Grandma's special blueberry pancakes. I would stand at the quartz island, flipping them golden on the griddle, while James sipped his coffee and scrolled through market reports on his phone. For those few minutes, I could almost pretend we were still the close family we used to be back in Michigan. But as soon as Sophia appeared, perfumed, polished, and ready for another day conquering the marketing world, the air shifted. She would kiss James quickly, hug the twins, and then glance at me with that tight, professional smile. "Eleanor, the laundry service is coming today. Make sure your things are in the hamper, not mixed with ours."
Or, "We're trying to cut back on carbs in the house. Maybe skip the pancakes tomorrow?" Small comments, polite on the surface, but each one chipped away at my sense of belonging. I started spending more time in the guest room, the one Sophia clearly resented me occupying. I would sit by the window overlooking their perfectly manicured backyard, watching the last autumn leaves drift down from the maple trees. The room was comfortable, soft gray walls, a queen bed with crisp white linens, and a small desk where I kept Robert's old pocket watch. But it no longer felt like a welcoming space. It felt temporary, like I was on borrowed time. One rainy afternoon, while Sophia was at the office and James had taken the twins to their soccer practice, I decided to make myself useful in the kitchen again. I baked a batch of oatmeal raisin cookies, the kind James had loved as a boy. The smell filled the house, warm and comforting, reminding me of happier Thanksgivings when Robert would sneak pieces before dinner. When Sophia came home that evening, she paused in the kitchen doorway, briefcase in hand, and wrinkled her nose slightly. "Cookies again, Eleanor? The twins don't need all that sugar, and James is watching his cholesterol since his father's heart attack." I felt the sting but kept my voice steady. "They're his favorite. I thought it would be a nice treat after soccer." She set her bag down with a sigh. "Look, I appreciate the help, but we have a routine here. The kids have structured snacks now, organic fruit and yogurt. It's better for their development." Structured snacks. Development. The words sounded like they came from one of her glossy parenting blogs rather than a mother speaking from the heart. I nodded anyway, wrapping the cookies and placing them high in the pantry where the twins couldn't reach them easily. That night, the real whispers began. I couldn't sleep again. The rain tapped steadily against the window like impatient fingers. Around 11:30 p.m., I slipped out of bed, pulled on my robe, and crept downstairs for a cup of chamomile tea. As I passed the master bedroom, the door was slightly ajar. James must have forgotten to close it after letting the dog out. Sophia's voice drifted into the hallway, low and sharp, the kind of tone she never used in front of the children or guests. "I'm serious, James. This can't go on much longer. Your mother has been here almost 3 months now. The guest room is supposed to be my home office. I'm drowning in deadlines for the holiday campaign, and every time I try to focus, she's either humming in the kitchen or asking the kids about their day like she's the primary parent." James's reply was muffled, exhausted. "Soph, she's grieving. Dad was her whole world. Give her a little more time."
Time? Sophia's laugh was bitter. "We've given her plenty. She's reorganizing everything. My spices, the linen closet, even the twins' toy rotation. I feel like a guest in my own house. And don't get me started on the money." My breath caught. I pressed myself against the wall, heart pounding, the tea forgotten. "What money?" James asked, his voice suddenly wary. "The trust fund your father set up. That money was supposed to help us with the house renovations, remember? My parents are struggling with their medical bills, and they could use a proper suite in the basement. Instead, it's sitting there while your mother plays house and acts like she's contributing. She's draining us emotionally and financially. If she doesn't start looking for her own place soon, I'm going to have to talk to a lawyer about reallocating some of those funds. It's only fair." A long silence followed. I could imagine James rubbing his temples the way he did when he was overwhelmed at work. "She helped us with the down payment years ago," he said quietly, "without asking for anything back." "That was then," Sophia snapped. "This is now. We have twins to think about. College funds, sports, private school eventually. We can't carry dead weight forever." Dead weight. The words sliced through me sharper than any knife. After all the free babysitting during their business trips, after the nights I stayed up with sick grandchildren so they could rest, after lending them money without ever mentioning interest or repayment, I had never asked for a single thing except to be close to my family. I backed away slowly, my bare feet silent on the cold floor. Tears blurred my vision as I returned to the guest room and closed the door with a soft click. I sat on the edge of the bed, clutching Robert's silver locket, the metal warm from my skin. How had it come to this? Sophia had once sent me flowers on Mother's Day with a card that read, "Thank you for raising the man I love." Now I was dead weight, a leech, someone whose presence was no longer convenient. The rain continued to fall outside, steady and relentless, mirroring the ache in my chest. I thought about calling my old friend Margaret back in Michigan, the one who had warned me gently before I moved. "Be careful, Eleanor. Sometimes adult children forget what their parents sacrificed." I hadn't listened then. I wanted to believe in family. Now, lying awake in the dark, listening to the distant murmur of more whispered arguments drifting up from downstairs, I wondered how much longer I could pretend everything was fine. Because the cracks were widening. Sophia wasn't just annoyed by my presence anymore. She was actively planning my exit, complete with legal threats and financial maneuvering. And James, my sweet, steady son, was caught in the middle, his loyalty stretched thin like an old rubber band ready to snap. I whispered into the darkness, fingers tracing the locket's delicate engraving. "Robert, if you were here, what would you tell me to do?" But the only answer was the rain and the growing certainty that the real storm was still coming. Something darker was hidden beneath Sophia's perfect suburban mask. I could feel it in my bones, the same instinct that had told me something was wrong the night Robert died. And soon, I would have to decide whether to keep silent or start digging for the truth. Because staying quiet might keep the peace, but it would also erase me completely.
The whispers in the dark left me raw and restless. For the next several days, I moved through the house like someone walking on thin ice, careful, quiet, always listening for the next crack. Naperville in late fall had turned crisp and golden, with maple trees along the quiet streets blazing in fiery reds and oranges. Families raked leaves into neat piles on weekends, and the air carried the scent of wood smoke from neighboring fireplaces. It should have felt cozy, like the Midwest autumns I loved back in Michigan. Instead, it felt cold and isolating, as if even the season was reminding me I no longer belonged here. I tried to stay out of Sophia's way. I volunteered at the twins' school for a reading hour, took long walks along the Riverwalk where ducks glided across the pond and joggers in expensive athleisure passed me with polite nods. But every time I returned to the house on that tree-lined street with its perfectly manicured lawns and white trim, the weight settled back on my chest. James seemed increasingly distant. He came home later from his downtown Chicago office, claiming heavy market reports in client meetings. At dinner, conversations stayed surface level. School projects, soccer scores, the upcoming holiday lights display in downtown Naperville. No one mentioned the trust fund. No one mentioned how long I planned to stay. The silence around those topics grew louder than any argument. One gray Thursday afternoon, with Sophia at a client lunch and James taking the twins to an after-school robotics club, the house felt unusually empty. I stood in the guest room, staring at the half-unpacked boxes I still hadn't fully settled into. My quilts from Michigan were folded neatly on the chair. Robert's pocket watch ticked softly on the nightstand. I felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to do something, anything, to reclaim a sense of control. That's when I noticed the desk in the corner of the guest room. It was meant to be Sophia's future home office, the one she kept reminding everyone she needed. The drawers were slightly ajar, as if someone had been rummaging recently and hadn't closed them properly. I told myself I shouldn't. I was raised to respect privacy. But the memory of Sophia's venomous whisper, "If she doesn't leave soon, I'm calling a lawyer about the trust fund," pushed me forward. With trembling hands, I opened the bottom drawer. Underneath stacks of old utility bills and tax papers from 2 years ago, I found a thick manila envelope. It wasn't labeled. My heart beat faster as I pulled it out. Inside were handwritten letters, several of them, tied together with a pale blue ribbon. They were addressed to Sophia's mother in Florida, dated from as early as last spring, months before Robert died, and long before I had agreed to move in. I sat on the edge of the bed, the letters heavy in my lap, and began to read. The first few were filled with complaints about work stress and the twins' busy schedules, normal daughter-to-mother talk. But then the tone shifted. "James is too soft when it comes to his mother," Sophia had written in her neat, slanted handwriting. "She's already hinting at moving closer after his father passes. I can see it coming. We'll end up with her in our guest room, rearranging everything and acting like she's the head of the household. I won't let that happen. This is our home, our life. Once she's settled somewhere else, we can finally expand the basement the way we planned, for you and Dad." My stomach twisted. She had been planning my exclusion even before Robert was gone. I kept reading, page after page. Sophia detailed how overwhelmed she felt with her high-pressure marketing job, the cost of private school waitlists for the twins, and the pressure of keeping up appearances in their upscale Naperville neighborhood, where every lawn was perfect and every family photo looked flawless. Then came the letter dated just 2 weeks after Robert's funeral. "Mom, the trust fund is bigger than I thought. Robert left a good portion directly for Eleanor's security, but James controls the rest. If we can convince him it's better used for the house and the kids' future, we could renovate properly. Eleanor doesn't need all that money sitting there. She'll be fine with Social Security and whatever small pension she gets. She's already talking about helping with the grandkids full-time. I love James, but he has this guilt thing with his mother. I need to break that before she becomes a permanent fixture." Tears blurred the words. I had never asked for control of the trust. Robert had set it up carefully, part for me to live comfortably, part for James and his family. It was meant to be a safety net, not a prize to fight over. But the final letter made my blood run cold. It was dated only 3 weeks ago. "Things are getting tense here. Eleanor is reorganizing the kitchen again and hovering with the kids. If she pushes too hard or starts asking questions about the finances, we may need to remind her what really happened the night Robert died, the accident details. She won't want the world, or James, to know the full truth. That should keep her quiet and speed up her exit. Once she's gone, we can finally move forward without the old leech draining our energy and resources." The word accident jumped off the page like a live wire. Robert died of a heart attack in his sleep. That's what the doctor told me. That's what the obituary said. A peaceful passing after a long, hard-working life. But Sophia was calling it an accident, and she was threatening to use it against me. What did she mean? Had there been an argument that night? Had stress from something she did trigger his heart attack? Or was there something even darker, something involving money, the trust, or her parents' debts?
My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the letters. I quickly photographed each one with my phone, careful to capture every date and every damning line. Then I tied them back exactly as I had found them and slid the envelope to the bottom of the drawer. I sat there for a long time, staring out the window at the quiet suburban street, where children rode bikes and neighbors waved from driveways. This perfect Naperville life, the Riverwalk picnics, the excellent schools, the beautiful colonial home, was built on lies and resentment. Sophia wasn't just trying to push me out because I was inconvenient. She was hiding something about my husband's final days, and she was willing to use it as a weapon if I didn't disappear quietly. The betrayal burned deeper than the old leech insult ever could. I clutched Robert's locket and whispered, "What did they do to you, my love?" Outside, the autumn wind picked up, rattling the bare branches. The pleasant fall weather Naperville was known for suddenly felt like the calm before a brutal storm. I knew I couldn't confront them yet, not without more proof. But from that moment on, I stopped being the grieving widow trying to fit in. I became a mother determined to uncover the truth, no matter how ugly it was. Because if Sophia thought she could erase me with whispers and threats, she had no idea what a woman who had nothing left to lose was capable of. The discovery of those hidden letters changed everything. I no longer drifted through the days in my son's Naperville home like a polite guest. Instead, I moved with quiet purpose, my grief hardening into something sharper, resolve. The beautiful suburban streets outside, lined with mature trees and expensive SUVs, now felt like a stage where everyone was performing except me. I smiled when expected, helped with the twins when asked, but inside, questions burned like embers that refused to die. I spent the following week pretending nothing had changed. Mornings, I still made the twins' favorite scrambled eggs with a side of fruit, watching Emma and Ethan chatter about school projects and upcoming holiday parties. James kissed my cheek before heading to his downtown Chicago commute, his eyes tired but kind. Sophia breezed through the house in her tailored outfits, her perfume leaving a trail of expensive vanilla and control. She never mentioned the letters. Of course she didn't. She had no idea I had read them. But I noticed the small power plays more clearly now. The way she accidentally left my laundry unfolded on the guest room bed. The way dinner conversations steered away from any mention of Michigan or Robert. The way she began dropping hints about local senior living communities during casual talks.
"Eleanor, have you seen the new retirement village near the Riverwalk?" she asked one evening while loading the dishwasher. "They have bridge clubs, yoga classes, even shuttle service to the city. It might be perfect for someone who wants to stay active but independent." I forced a smile. "I'm quite active right here, Sophia. Helping with the grandchildren keeps me young." Her lips tightened, but she said nothing more in front of James. Thanksgiving was approaching fast, and Sophia announced with bright enthusiasm that she wanted to host a big family dinner. "To show we're a united front," she said at breakfast one Saturday, her eyes flicking toward me for just a second. "My parents are flying in from Florida, and James invited a couple of colleagues from the firm. It'll be lovely. Turkey, all the trimmings, the kids performing their school songs, classic American Thanksgiving." James nodded, looking relieved that things seemed normal. "Sounds great, Soph. Mom, you'll help with the cooking, right? Your stuffing is legendary." I agreed, of course. Part of me still hoped that gathering around the table might soften the edges of our fractured family. Maybe breaking bread together would remind Sophia of the woman who had welcomed her into our lives with open arms years ago. The week before Thanksgiving became a whirlwind of preparation. I shopped at the local Whole Foods for organic turkey and fresh herbs, while Sophia handled the wine selection and table settings. The house filled with the scent of pumpkin spice candles and simmering cranberries. The twins practiced their Thanksgiving poems, and for a few short hours each day, the tension eased into something almost warm. But underneath, the undercurrent remained strong. On the Tuesday before the holiday, while Sophia was at a last-minute work meeting,
I overheard her on a quick phone call with her mother when she returned. "Yes, Mom, everything is set. Eleanor will be there, but I made it clear this is the last big family event with her playing hostess. After the holidays, we really need to encourage her to find her own place. The basement renovation plans are ready once the guest room is free." Her mother's reply was muffled, but I caught the words trust fund and fair share. I backed away from the hallway, my pulse racing. The letters hadn't been empty threats. Sophia was orchestrating my exit with the precision of one of her marketing campaigns. Thanksgiving Day arrived cold and bright, the kind of crisp Illinois November day where the sky is a sharp blue and frost glitters on the lawns. The house smelled incredible: roasted turkey, sage stuffing, sweet potato casserole with marshmallows on top, and 3 different pies cooling on the counter. Sophia had set the long dining table with her best china, fall-colored linens, and little name cards in elegant calligraphy. My seat was at the far end, near the children, while her parents sat close to James at the head. Her mother, Diane, was a sharp-eyed woman in her 70s, with perfectly dyed hair and a tight smile. Her father, Harold, walked with a cane and complained about the flight the entire time. They greeted me politely but coolly, as if I were a distant relative, rather than the mother of their son-in-law. The meal started pleasantly enough. James carved the turkey with practiced ease. The twins recited their poems, earning applause. Conversation flowed around work, the stock market, and the latest neighborhood news. I contributed stories about Robert, how he loved carving the turkey every year, how he always snuck extra stuffing when he thought no one was looking. Sophia raised her glass halfway through the main course, her smile radiant for the guests. "To new beginnings," she said, her eyes locking directly onto mine across the table, "and to making space for what really matters most, our immediate family and the future we're building together." The words hung in the air. James shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Diane nodded approvingly. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, but kept my expression calm. "To family," I added softly, lifting my own glass. "All of it." After dessert, while the men watched football in the living room and the twins played upstairs, Sophia cornered me in the kitchen. The counters were still cluttered with dishes, but her voice was low and controlled. "Eleanor, we've been talking. James and I think it's best if you move into assisted living nearby after the holidays. There's a lovely community just 10 minutes away. Independent living with meals and activities. We'll cover the first 3 months as a gesture. It's for your own good, really. You deserve to be around people your age instead of feeling like a burden here." Burden. The word echoed the old leech insult I had overheard weeks earlier. My hands trembled as I dried a serving platter. "Assisted living? Sophia, I'm healthy. I don't need." "It's not about need," she interrupted smoothly. "It's about space. Our space. The twins are getting older and need consistency. James is under a lot of pressure at work. This arrangement was always temporary." Before I could respond, James walked in, catching the tail end. "Soph, maybe we can talk about this later?" But the seed had been planted. The trap was set. Thanksgiving wasn't about gratitude or unity. It was Sophia's way of publicly signaling that my time in their home was ending, nicely wrapped in concern and holiday cheer. That night, after the guests had left and the house was quiet once more, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The leftover pie sat heavy in my stomach. I felt heartbroken, humiliated, and increasingly angry. Was this what my years of love and support had earned me? To be politely escorted out like an unwanted piece of furniture? Around 1 a.m., my phone buzzed on the nightstand with an unknown number. The text was short and chilling. "She's hiding more than you think. Check the safe in the basement. The code is James's birthday. Don't trust her." I sat up straight, heart hammering. Who had sent this? How did they know what was happening inside this house? And what exactly was hidden in that safe? The anonymous message felt like a lifeline thrown into stormy waters, or perhaps a baited hook leading me deeper into danger. Either way, I knew I couldn't ignore it. Tomorrow, while the house was busy with post-Thanksgiving cleanup and James took the family to see the holiday lights, I would find my way to the basement. The real truth about Robert's death, about the trust fund, and about the woman my son had married was waiting down there in the dark. And once I opened that safe, there would be no turning back. Dinner was supposed to feel warm,
familiar, like home. But that night, it felt like sitting in a room where I didn't belong. Jessica had set the table with careful precision. 3 plates neatly aligned, silverware placed perfectly, napkins folded like something out of a magazine. Everything looked beautiful. Too beautiful. Like something staged, not lived in. I stood near the doorway for a moment, watching them. Mark was already seated, scrolling through his phone, his face lit by the soft blue glow of the screen. Jessica moved back and forth between the kitchen and the dining table, placing dishes down without looking at me. No one said, "Come sit." So I quietly pulled out the chair myself. The sound of it scraping lightly against the floor echoed louder than it should have. Still, no one spoke. I folded my hands in my lap for a second, then reached for my napkin just to give myself something to do. The silence wrapped around us like something heavy, uncomfortable.
Unnatural. I cleared my throat gently. So, this smells wonderful, Jessica. She didn't look at me. Thanks, she said shortly, adjusting a dish in front of Mark. That was it. No smile, no warmth, just polite distance. Mark finally glanced up for a second. Yeah, it looks great, he added quickly, like he was trying to fill the gap. Then his eyes dropped back to his phone. I felt invisible. We started eating. The clinking of forks against plates became the loudest sound in the room. I tried again. So, Mark, how's work been? He shrugged slightly, still not fully looking at me. Busy, same stuff. Same stuff. That was all I got. I nodded slowly, pretending that was enough. But it wasn't. I had spent weeks thinking about this visit, imagining long conversations, laughter, catching up on everything I had missed. Instead, I was sitting across from my own son, feeling like a stranger asking small talk questions. Jessica's phone buzzed on the table. She picked it up instantly. A faint smile appeared on her lips as she read whatever message had come through. For a second, I saw a version of her I hadn't seen all evening, lighter, warmer. Then she remembered I was there. The smile disappeared. She set the phone down and went back to eating. That hurt more than I expected. I wasn't asking for much, just a little kindness. A little effort. Something to remind me that I mattered. I took a small bite of food, but I couldn't even taste it. It felt like chewing cardboard. The air felt thick, like every breath required effort. I glanced at Mark again. "Do you remember," I said softly, "that little Italian place we used to go to? The one with the red booths?" For a moment, his eyes flickered with recognition. "Yeah, I think so." "You loved their spaghetti," I continued, a small smile forming despite everything. "You used to make such a mess, sauce everywhere." For just a second, I thought I saw him smile, but it vanished quickly. "Yeah, that was a long time ago," he said, his tone flat. A long time ago. Like it didn't matter anymore. Like I didn't belong to that part of his life anymore. Jessica shifted in her seat, clearly uninterested. She picked up her glass, took a sip, then set it down with a soft clink. Then, without looking at me, she spoke. "How long are you planning to stay?" The words were calm, almost casual, but they hit me like a slap. I froze. My fork hovered midair. For a second, I thought maybe I had heard her wrong, but I hadn't. The question hung there, sharp and undeniable. I slowly lowered my fork. I'm not sure yet," I said carefully. Jessica nodded slightly, like she was processing information, not feelings. "Because we've got a lot going on," she continued. "Work, schedules, things are pretty tight." Tight. That word again. Like I was something that didn't fit. I looked at Mark, waiting, hoping, needing him to say something, anything. But he stayed quiet, just eating, avoiding eye contact. That silence said everything. It told me where I stood,
or rather, where I didn't.
I understand, I said softly, even though my chest felt like it was caving in. I don't want to be in the way. Jessica finally looked at me then, for the first time all evening, but there was no softness in her eyes. No one's saying that, she replied, but her tone said otherwise. Everything about this moment said otherwise. I forced a small smile, the kind you give when you're trying not to break. It's okay, I added. I can make other arrangements if needed. The words tasted bitter. Other arrangements. Like I wasn't already supposed to be here. Like I hadn't been invited. Mark finally spoke, but his voice was quiet. You don't have to rush, Mom. But it didn't sound convincing. It sounded obligated, like something he had to say, not something he meant. And somehow that hurt even more. Dinner ended soon after that. Not with laughter, not with connection, just plates being cleared and chairs quietly pushed back. I stood up slowly, unsure of what to do next. Thank you for dinner, I said. Jessica nodded.
Mark gave me a brief glance, and just like that, it was over. But the feeling stayed, that heavy, sinking feeling in my chest, the kind that doesn't go away when the table is cleared, the kind that follows you into the quiet of your room. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, one thought kept repeating in my mind. I'm not welcome here. And for the first time since I arrived, I started to wonder if I should leave. I didn't turn on the lights. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling in the dark. The house was quiet now, too quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't comfort you, it presses down on you, suffocates you. From somewhere down the hall, I could hear faint movement. Maybe Jessica cleaning up, maybe Mark saying something in a low voice. I couldn't make out the words, but I didn't need to.
I had already heard everything I needed to hear at that dinner table. How long are you planning to stay? The question kept replaying in my mind like a broken record. Not, are you comfortable? Not, do you need anything? Just, how long? Like I was a deadline, an inconvenience with an expiration date. I closed my eyes, but it didn't help. The memories came anyway. Mark, as a little boy, running toward me after school, his backpack bouncing behind him. Mom, you won't believe what happened today. The way he used to look at me back then, like I was his whole world. I swallowed hard. What changed? Or maybe the harder question was, when did I stop being part of his world? I turned onto my side, pulling the blanket closer around me, even though I wasn't cold. It wasn't the temperature. It was something deeper.
Something emptier. I had spent so many years being strong for others that I didn't even recognize what it felt like to be this fragile. A soft creak echoed from the hallway. Footsteps. Slow. Careful. They paused outside my door. I held my breath. For a second, I thought maybe it was Mark. Maybe he'd knock. Maybe he'd come in, sit beside me, and say, Mom, I'm sorry. This isn't how I want things to be. I waited. 1 second. 2. 3. Nothing. The footsteps moved on. And just like that, the small piece of hope I didn't even realize I was holding on to slipped away. I exhaled slowly, staring back into the darkness. That was the moment something shifted inside me. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, deeply, permanently. I sat up in bed. The room felt unfamiliar, even though I had only been there one night. My suitcase was still half unpacked in the corner, clothes neatly folded, like I had planned to stay, like I had believed I belonged. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and sat there for a moment, letting the weight of everything settle. Then I stood up. My movements were slow at first, almost hesitant, like I was waiting for someone to stop me. But no one did. Of course no one did. I walked over to the suitcase and knelt down beside it. My hands hovered over my clothes. For a brief second, I felt a sting in my chest. Is this really happening? I had come here hoping to feel less alone,
And somehow I had never felt more alone in my life. I picked up a sweater and folded it carefully. Then another.
And another. Each piece of clothing going back into the suitcase felt like a quiet goodbye. Not just to this house, but to something bigger. Something I had held on to for years. The belief that I still had a place here. Halfway through packing, I stopped. My hands rested on the edge of the suitcase as I stared down at it. Tears finally filled my eyes. Not loud, not dramatic, just silent, heavy. I gave him everything, I whispered to myself. My voice sounded small in the empty room. I gave him everything, and this is where I ended up. The words didn't come out angry. They came out tired, like a truth I could no longer avoid. I wiped my tears quickly, because something inside me refused to fall apart completely. Not here, not like this. I stood up and walked over to the window. The street outside was dimly lit, quiet, still. A few streetlights flickered softly in the distance. The world kept moving, even when your own world felt like it was falling apart. And that's when the thought came. Clear, unexpected, powerful. What about me? I frowned slightly, almost surprised by it. I had spent my entire life asking what others needed, what Mark needed, what my husband needed, what everyone else needed. But I had never asked, what do I need? The question lingered in the air, unfamiliar, almost uncomfortable, but also freeing. I took a deep breath, and for the first time in years, I allowed myself to answer it. I need peace, I whispered. I need respect. My voice grew steadier. I need to feel like I matter. The words settled into something solid inside me, something strong. And suddenly, the decision didn't feel impossible anymore. It felt necessary. I walked back to the bed and sat down again. My eyes drifted toward the door. Part of me still hoped it would open, that Mark would walk in, that everything would somehow fix itself. But deep down, I knew better. Some things don't fix themselves. Some things only change when you change them. I glanced at the clock on the nightstand. 3:47 a.m. An oddly specific time, a moment suspended between night and morning, between what was and what could be. And right there, in that quiet, fragile hour, I made the decision. I was leaving. Not out of anger, not out of revenge, but out of self-respect. I would not stay where I wasn't wanted. I would not beg for a place in my own son's life, and I would not shrink myself just to make others comfortable. I stood up again, this time with purpose. I finished packing the rest of my things, closing the suitcase with a soft click that felt louder than it should have. Final, certain, real. I looked around the room one last time. There was nothing here that belonged to me, and maybe that was the clearest answer of all. As I reached for the door handle, I paused, just for a second. A lifetime of memories, of love, sacrifice, motherhood, passed quietly through my mind. Then I opened the door and stepped into the hallway. Not as a guest, not as a burden, but as a woman, finally choosing herself. The house was still asleep, or at least it pretended to be. The hallway was dim, lit only by a faint glow from a small nightlight near the stairs. Every step I took felt louder than it should have, like the silence itself was listening. I held my suitcase handle tightly, trying not to let the wheels make a sound against the floor. I didn't want a scene. I didn't want explanations. And most of all, I didn't want to hear anything that might make me stay. Because I knew myself. One soft word from Mark. One "Mom, wait." And I might break. I might forgive everything. And I couldn't afford that. Not this time. I reached the kitchen and stopped. For a moment, I just stood there. This was the same kitchen where, just a few hours ago, I had sat at the table feeling like I didn't exist. Now it felt even colder, like a place that had already erased me. I slowly placed my suitcase near the door. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of what I was about to do. Leaving quietly, without saying goodbye, it wasn't something I ever imagined doing, not to my own son. But then again, I had never imagined being made to feel like a stranger in his home either. I pulled out a chair and sat down at the table. For a second, I just stared at the empty surface in front of me. Then I reached into my purse and took out a small notebook. The pen felt heavier than usual in my hand. I opened to a blank page and froze. What do you write when your heart is breaking, but you refuse to show it? What do you say when you love someone deeply, but you can no longer stay where they've placed you? I took a slow breath, then another, and finally I began. Mark. I paused. Even writing his name made my chest tighten. I continued. I didn't come here to be a burden. The words felt sharp, honest, necessary. I came here because I thought I still had a place in your life. My vision blurred for a second, but I blinked the tears away. Not now. I had to finish this. I believed you when you said I shouldn't be alone. But somehow I've never felt more alone than I did sitting at your table tonight. My hand trembled slightly as I wrote that. Because it was the truth. And the truth doesn't always come out gently. I stopped writing for a moment and looked around the kitchen. The same clean counters. The same neatly arranged dishes. Everything in its place. Except me. I looked back down at the paper. Maybe things have changed. Maybe your life is different now. And I understand that. But what I don't understand is how I became someone who has to ask how long I'm allowed to stay in my own son's home.
The pen pressed a little harder against the page, not out of anger, but out of pain I could no longer soften. I exhaled slowly, then kept writing. I spent my life making sure you had everything you needed: love, safety, a future, and I would do it all over again without hesitation. But somewhere along the way, I forgot to make sure I had those things too. A tear slipped down my cheek. This time I didn't stop it. I let it fall onto the page, leaving a small mark beside the words. Real, unfiltered, mine. I wiped my face gently and continued. So for the first time in a very long time, I'm choosing myself. The sentence felt different, stronger, like something inside me had finally found its voice. This isn't goodbye. It's just me stepping away from a place where I no longer feel wanted. I paused again, because this part mattered. Every word mattered. I love you, Mark. That part would never change, no matter how much everything else had. But love shouldn't feel like this. It shouldn't feel like silence, or distance, or something you have to earn just to exist. I swallowed hard. My hand tightened slightly around the pen. Then I wrote the final lines. Take care of your life. I'll take care of mine. Mom. I stared at the letter for a long moment, reading it over silently, not to fix it, not to soften it, but to accept it. Because once I left this here, there was no going back to the version of me who walked into this house with hope.
I carefully tore the page from the notebook and folded it once, then again. Simple, neat, final. I placed it in the center of the table, right where he would see it, right where I had sat the night before. For a second, I imagined him reading it, his expression, his reaction. Would he feel regret? Would he understand? Or would it just be another moment, quickly forgotten? I didn't know. And for the first time, I realized I didn't need to know. That was his journey. This was mine. I stood up slowly. The chair made a soft sound as it moved back, that no one came. No doors opened. No voices called out. The house remained still. Just like before. I picked up my suitcase and walked toward the front door. My heart beat steadily now, not racing, not panicking, just calm, strangely calm, like something inside me had settled into place. I reached for the doorknob.
3 days. That's how long it took for my phone to ring. 3 quiet, peaceful, unfamiliar days. I had checked into a small apartment on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, just a clean space with white walls, a narrow window, and a bed that didn't carry memories or expectations. For the first time in a long time, everything around me felt neutral. And somehow, that felt like freedom. No tension. No silence that screamed louder than words. No feeling like I had to shrink myself just to exist. Just space. Space to breathe, space to think, space to feel something other than unwanted. I had spent those 3 days unpacking slowly, not just my suitcase, but parts of myself I had ignored for years. I cooked simple meals. I sat by the window in the mornings with a cup of coffee, watching people pass by, strangers with their own lives, their own stories. And for once, I wasn't thinking about what anyone else needed from me. I was learning what it felt like to just be. But that didn't mean it didn't hurt, because it did. Late at night, when everything got quiet again, the memories came back. Mark as a child, his laugh, the way he used to reach for my hand without even thinking. And sometimes I wondered if I had made the right decision, if leaving like that without a word was too harsh, if maybe I should have stayed, tried harder, said more. But then I would remember the dinner, the silence, the question, how long are you planning to stay? And the doubt would fade. Because some things don't need more explanation. They're already clear. Still, the heart doesn't always follow logic, and mine was still catching up. It was mid-afternoon on the 3rd day when my phone rang. I was sitting at the small kitchen table, a half-finished cup of tea in front of me. The sound startled me. I hadn't heard it ring in days. I glanced at the screen. My breath caught. Mark. For a second, I just stared at his name. My thumb hovered over the screen. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to protect the fragile peace I had started to build. But another part of me, the part that would always be his mother, couldn't. I answered. Hello? There was a pause on the other end. Then I heard his voice. Mom? It sounded different. Not distant, not distracted, but shaken, like something inside him had finally cracked. I didn't respond right away. I just held the phone close, listening. Mom, I read your letter. His voice faltered slightly. I didn't know. I didn't realize it was that bad. A small, bitter thought crossed my mind. You didn't realize? But I pushed it aside. This wasn't the moment for anger. This was something else. I'm listening, I said quietly. There was another pause, longer this time, like he was searching for the right words and realizing there weren't any easy ones. I messed up, he finally said. Simple, direct, honest. I should have said something at dinner,
I should have stopped it. I should have. His voice broke slightly. I should have stood up for you. The words hit me harder than I expected. Not because I hadn't known it, but because hearing him say it made it real in a different way. I closed my eyes for a moment, taking it in. You didn't, I said softly. No, I didn't, he admitted. And for once, he didn't try to defend it. That mattered, more than he probably realized. I was trying to keep the peace, he continued. I didn't want things to turn into a fight, and I thought maybe it wasn't a big deal. A quiet, painful truth settled between us. But it was, he added quickly. It was a big deal. I see that now. I walked slowly toward the window, looking out at the street below. People moving.
Life continuing, while everything inside me felt suspended in this moment. What changed? I asked. The question came out calm, but it carried weight, because I needed to know. There was a deep breath on the other end. You leaving, he said. That letter? The house felt empty in a way I can't explain. Not just quiet, but wrong. I said nothing. He kept going. I kept replaying everything in my head. The dinner, what Jessica said, what I didn't say. His voice tightened, and I realized I failed you. The honesty in his voice was undeniable. Raw, uncomfortable, real. And I talked to Jessica, he added. That made my chest tighten slightly. And? I asked carefully. There was a pause, this one heavier than the others. I told her things have to change, he said firmly. That I won't let anyone, talk about you like that again. My fingers tightened slightly around the phone. I should have made that clear from the beginning. His voice softened.
But I didn't, and that's on me. I leaned my forehead lightly against the window, letting the cool glass ground me. I don't expect you to just come back like nothing happened, he continued quickly. I know I don't deserve that. That surprised me, because I had expected him to ask me to return immediately, to fix things, to go back to how they were. But he didn't. I want a chance to make it right, he said, to show you that you matter, that you're not a burden, that you never were. A lump formed in my throat, because those were the words I had needed to hear. But they came after I had already walked away, and that changed something. I miss you, he added quietly. Silence filled the space between us again. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was full of regret.
Of truth. Of something fragile trying to rebuild itself. I took a slow breath. Mark, I said gently. Yes? I'm proud of you for saying all this. And I meant it, because it wasn't easy. But then I paused, because the next part mattered even more. But I can't come back right now. The words were calm, steady, certain. There was silence on the other end. Not shocked, not angry, just quiet acceptance. I understand, he said after a moment. And for the first time, he really did. I just hope you'll give me another chance, he added softly. I looked out the window again, at the life I was slowly building, at the space I had created for myself. I will, I said. But things have to be different. They will be, he replied immediately. And this time, I believed he meant it. Maybe not perfectly, maybe not instantly, but genuinely. We stayed on the phone a little longer, not talking about the past, not arguing, just talking, like we used to. And when the call finally ended, I stood there for a moment, holding the phone in my hand. My heart felt lighter.
Not healed, not whole, but lighter, because something had shifted, not just in him, but in me. I hadn't gone back. I hadn't given in. And yet, I hadn't closed the door completely either. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is walk away and still leave space for something better to return. I didn't go back. Not the next day, not the next week, and not even when everything inside me whispered that it would be easier to return to what I knew. Because I understood something now that I hadn't before. Going back too soon would mean going back as the same version of me who had walked out. And that version of me had accepted too little for far too long. So I stayed in my small, quiet apartment, the place that didn't try to impress anyone, but somehow gave me more peace than that big, beautiful house ever did. At first, it felt strange, waking up alone, making breakfast just for myself, sitting in silence without feeling like I had to fill it. But slowly, that silence changed. It stopped feeling empty and started feeling calm, safe, mine. I began to build small routines, morning coffee by the window, short walks in the evening, reading books I had put off for years because I was always too busy taking care of someone else. For the first time in decades, my life wasn't centered around anyone but me, and I didn't feel guilty about it. That was new. That was powerful. Mark called again, not every day, but often enough to show that he meant what he said. Our conversations were different now, more honest, more intentional. He listened more, really listened, and I spoke more, not as a mother trying to protect his feelings, but as a woman finally expressing her own. One afternoon, about 3 weeks after I left, he asked, "Can I see you?" There was hesitation in his voice, careful, respectful, like he understood that this wasn't something he could demand anymore. I paused, not because I didn't want to see him, but because I wanted to be sure that I wasn't saying yes out of habit, out of guilt, out of the old version of me. "I'd like that," I said finally. We agreed to meet at a small cafe downtown, neutral ground, no tension-filled walls, no memories sitting in every corner. Just two people, meeting again. When I walked in, I saw him immediately. He stood up the moment our eyes met. And for a second, I saw the same boy who used to run toward me after school. But now, there was something else in his expression, something deeper. Regret, growth, understanding. "Mom," he said softly. I smiled. "Hi, Mark." There was a brief pause. Then he stepped forward and hugged me, tightly. Not out of obligation, not out of it, but like he meant it, like he didn't want to let go. And for a moment, neither did I. We sat down across from each other. There was no awkward silence this time, no distance, just honesty waiting to be spoken. "I've been thinking a lot," he began. "I know you have," I replied gently. He nodded. "I let things get out of control. I put you in a position where you felt unwanted, and I didn't fix it when I should have." His voice was steady, but his eyes carried the weight. "I can't change what happened," he continued, "but I can change how I show up moving forward." I studied his face, not looking for perfection, but for sincerity. And I saw it. "I'm not asking you to come back," he added quickly, "not like before." That surprised me again, because it showed something important. He wasn't trying to pull me back into the same situation. He was trying to meet me where I was. "I just want a relationship with you that feels right, for both of us." I took a slow breath, because this was the moment. The moment where I had to choose, not just what I wanted, but who I wanted to be. "I want that too," I said, and I meant it. "But it has to be different." "It will be," he said immediately. "No,
I replied gently but firmly. Not just for a while, not just when it's easy. I leaned forward slightly. It has to be built on respect, on honesty, on understanding that I'm not just your mother, I'm a person. He nodded. I know that now. And I'm not coming back to live there, I added. The words were calm, clear, final. There was no anger in them, just truth. He didn't argue, didn't push, didn't try to convince me otherwise. Okay, he said. And in that simple word, there was acceptance, real acceptance, not forced, not reluctant, but genuine. And that meant everything. We talked for a long time after that, about small things, about life, about the future. And for the first time in a long time, it felt natural, not forced, not strained, just real. When we finally stood up to leave, he looked at me again. I'm really proud of you, he said.
I smiled softly. Thank you. But then I added, I'm proud of me too. And that was something I had never said before. Not out loud, not like that. We walked out of the cafe together, then stopped at the sidewalk. 2 separate paths, 2 separate lives, connected, but no longer dependent. I'll call you, he said. I know, I replied. He hesitated for a second, then hugged me again before walking away. I watched him go, not with sadness, not with longing, but with peace, because I knew something now that I hadn't known before. Love doesn't mean losing yourself. It doesn't mean staying where you're not valued. And it doesn't mean accepting less than you deserve just to keep the connection. Sometimes, love means setting boundaries, choosing yourself, and allowing others the chance to grow without sacrificing who you are. I turned and began walking in the opposite direction, back to my apartment, back to my life, back to the version of me I had finally found. And as I walked, I realized something that changed everything. I didn't lose my son. I just stopped losing myself.